Hi everybody and welcome back to the channel. This is another series in the classic cameras from the past. We'll be looking at some of the old film cameras, having a careful look at them, show you how they work, how to load film into them, and at the end of the video I'll show you pictures that I've taken with the camera. And the camera that we're going to have a close look at is this one. It's the Kiev 4. A direct copy or clone of the Contax II camera, one of the finest rangefinder cameras ever made. Now I'll just give you a brief history how this camera came into being, and we have to go back to around about 1925 when Leica fetched out the 35mm rangefinder camera that took the photographic world by storm, and Contax realised that they had to do something to compete with Leica, and in 1932 they fetched out the Contax I rangefinder camera, but unfortunately they tended to have rushed that to get it out to compete, and that had quite a few reliability problems. But over the years the camera got better and better until 1936 they came up with the Contax II, which is an exact looking camera to this one. Now, as we all know, World War broke out in Europe in 1939, and by 1945 the Germans were defeated and Russia took over East Germany. Now they wanted to get some payback from the Germans, and they took over the Zeiss Icon factory. I think it was in Dresden at that time, and they not just took over the factory, they removed all the factory, all its components, the production line, raw materials, and they moved it to get, as I said, to get manufacturing going again in Russia to Kiev in the Ukraine. Not only did they take all that, they took some of the German technicians who made these Contax cameras. So if you bought one of the really early models, you're actually buying a Contax II camera, but it's got Kiev on the front. That's how good these cameras were at that time. Now, as the years went by, some of the technicians died. The German technicians all left. Some of the raw materials were running out, and the production line, the machinery for making these cameras, slowly deteriorated. And as they broke down, they tried to fix it, but the quality control of the Kiev really went downhill from about 1980 onwards. But prior to 1980 they're all pretty reliable. Now I would suggest, if you're buying one of these cameras, don't go for the models in the 1980s built, go for the models built before that, the earlier models, and you can always tell what year of manufacture the camera is. If you're buying one, you can always ask. The serial number, the first two digits, tell you the year of manufacture. Now my camera, if you can see that, was built in 1974, and I've had no problems with this camera. The reason why the Contax camera was so popular, it really knocked the spots off the Leica, there are quite a few reasons. I'll show you when we have a closer look, but quickly, the rangefinder base on this, from that viewfinder window to the rangefinder window, was 9 centimeters, which gave very, very accurate focusing, so it made a big difference. This camera had a vertical travel metal shutter, so you couldn't burn the shutter out with light coming through the lens and burning a hole in the shutter, and it also meant that they could get speeds that the Leica couldn't do. This camera can go up to 1,000th of a second. In fact, it's marked at 1250th of a second, but it's more likely to be 1,000th. The loading on this camera, I'll show you next, is a lot simpler than the Leica camera of that time. So all in all, a beautiful camera, but one of the best things about this camera, the Kiev 4, this is a Kiev 4A, is it's affordable. So let's take a closer look at the camera. I'll show you its functions, buttons and knobs, how they work, how to load film into the camera, and then at the end of all that I'll show you some of the pictures I've actually taken with this camera and the Jupiter 8 lens. So let's take a look at a closer look at this camera. So let's take a closer look at this rangefinder camera, the Kiev 4. This is a Kiev 4A. It's a copy, as I've said before, an exact copy of the Contax II rangefinder cameras, which were pre-war. And those cameras were very advanced in their design as compared to, say, the Leica cameras. One of the main things was the rangefinder base. Here we have the viewfinder window, and this is the rangefinder window, and the width between these two windows is around about 90 millimeters, and that gave it the widest base length of any rangefinder camera available at that time, and probably even today. And this means that you get very accurate focusing with this camera. The other innovative thing about the camera was the shutter. I'll show you the shutter. I showed that in the opening sequence. Most rangefinder cameras of that period didn't have very fast shutter speeds. This one, we wind it on, you can see as I wind the camera on, it's a vertical travel shutter. Press the shutter and it drops straight down. So that enabled this camera to have a top shutter speed of 1/1000th of a second. They did increase this speed to 12/50th of a second, but it said that the 1250 was probably more like 1/1000th of a second. So that was a very advanced feature. And also the shutter is made of metal, it's not cloth, so you know you're not going to burn the shutter out by pointing the shutter light coming through from the sun to the shutter and burning holes in it, which happened to some of the Leica cameras. Another thing where it was very advanced, at the back of the camera we've got one viewfinder window. On the older type Leica cameras there were two windows, one for focusing and one for composition, so you had to move your eye between the two windows on the Leica. With this one it was a couple rangefinder and you could do everything to that viewfinder, compose and focus. So all in all, a very advanced camera for its time, and it really did make Leica sit up and rethink their cameras. It wasn't till I think the M3 came out that they started to use the single viewfinder, but even to this day the rangefinder width of the Leica cameras and cameras similar to these were nothing compared to the base width of the rangefinder on this camera. Now there is a little quirk with this camera. I'll just put the back on, and it's how you hold the camera. You've probably seen this in many videos, but I'll let you I'll put my take on it a little bit. When the lens is at infinity, you can't move the lens, it's locked, and you have to press in that little lever and move that dial, and then you can move the lens and focus. Now when you first get hold of these cameras, you probably get hold of it like that, and then you try to focus through the window but you can't see the rangefinder, and it's because your finger is over the rangefinder window itself. So you've got to hold this camera in a special way. It's called a Contax grip, and that's where you use this finger to go onto the focusing knob and the infinity lock lever, the other finger on the shutter, and then these fingers go below the rangefinder window, and then you simply can focus. By looking through the rangefinder you can focus because you're not blocking the rangefinder window. So once it's off infinity, the infinity lock, you can use the camera like any conventional camera by rotating the lens to focus. But if you do focus too far towards infinity, you can hear that. I'll just turn it back, listen, it locks, and you can only unlock it by pressing this lever down. So it's a little bit quirky, but you do get used to it. The lens mount on this is a Contax mount, but I'll show you that in a minute closer. And the lens that came with this, my particular camera, is the Jupiter 8 50mm f2 lens. It's a really nice lens, and as I say, I'll give you a closer look at this lens when I show you the actual knobs and levers that operate this camera. I'll give you a close-up view of that. So we'll take a little look. If you compare that with the Zorki, I don't know if we can see that in size. The Zorki is quite a bit heavier, and it's about the same length, but it's taller. It's just slightly taller, not much in it, but this feels a lighter camera, although it feels solid to use. There's just one thing in the opening part of the video. I showed this camera with the shoe mounted meter on it, the Voigtlander VC 2 meter. I just use that because it saves me carrying a separate handheld light meter, and I've got everything in one unit here. I can just go out this camera, load it with film, and then use this to meter with. So that doesn't come with the camera. It's something I bought, and I use it as an attachment for taking light readings. So we'll take another closer look at this camera. I'll show you, as I say, how the knobs operate, and I'll show you also how to load this, how to load the Kiev 4. So we'll start at the front of the camera, and I'll show you how you tip the lens off one of these cameras. If we look carefully, just round about there where this finger is, there's a little lever. You have to make sure the lens is on infinity, and you press that lever in and just twist, and the lens comes off. And this is the lens. It's the Jupiter 50mm lens. It's an absolutely beautiful lens. The camera on the Contax came with a sonar, either an f1.5 or an f2, but I don't think those lenses were coated. This one is. The aperture ranges from f2 down to f22, and it's in full f-stops, the clicks on the lens, but you can set it to half stops, so it's not a problem. The mount on the Contax camera, the Contax mount, it has an interior mount, bayonet mount, and it has an exterior bayonet mount. The interior one, I think I'm right in saying, is for the 50mm lens, and the exterior mount, I can't show you a lens that fits on the outside because I haven't got one, but any other lens than the 50mm would mount on the exterior mount of the lens, and it clips onto the side. It has a depth of field scale around it. That's actually on the body and not on the lens, and I think, but I stand corrected on this, that might only be applicable to the 50mm lens. Now if you were to use different lenses on this camera, you would have to buy an accessory, a turret finder, viewfinder, to match the focal length of the lens that you're using to give you the correct view for that type of lens. The viewfinder in this camera doesn't have frame lines, and it's designed for this, the 50mm lens. So what you see in this viewfinder is what you get with the 50mm lens. So as I say, you'd need, for other lenses, you'd need a separate viewfinder. To mount the lens, you simply align the, let's have a little look, the red dot which is on the lens there, with the red dot on the body which is there, and then just place it like that, and it just clips into place easily. So it's a really nice system. There's no way, I don't think, of undoing this infinity lock other than pressing this lever down. But as I say, it doesn't. You do get used to it, and you'll probably focus it using that, and then focusing manually with the lens itself. What else have we got on the front? We've got the rangefinder window, the viewfinder window, and then we've got a self timer, and then there's a PC socket there for a flash gun. The top of the camera, you've got a reminder, although it's in Russian, I think GOSH, for the ISO of the film. I never use that. This acts as the rewind knob, and then we've got the cold shoe. It's a cold shoe on this, and on these cameras the first two numbers give you the year of manufacture, and on my camera it was built in 1974, so this is probably a decent model, and I've certainly had no problems with this camera. Next to it is the frame counter. You set that after you load the film in, and this is a little knob there, if you can see that, a little knob there that you reset the frame counter. I'll show you how to do that on the load film. And this is the combined wind on knob and where you set the shutter speeds. It's always advisable with these type of cameras to always wind the shutter on before you lift the dial up to change the shutter speed. You actually lift the dial up and you can turn it to any of the shutter speeds that are on the scale. Don't know if you can see those, but they run on this camera from B, half a second, right the way around to 1/250th of a second. So to cock the shutter, always wind on like that, lift it up and then change your shutter speeds. I'll let you listen to this camera at half a second, because it does make an unusual sound, and you might think if you've got one for the first time that there's actually something wrong with it, but in fact it's just the way they're made. So we're set to half a second there. Now just listen to the shutter firing. Do it one more time. There's nothing wrong with the shutter, it's just how it's made and how it works, and it creates that sound, which is quite normal. When you go to the faster speeds, we take it right round to what's that at 125. It's just a lovely shutter, lovely sounding shutter, very quiet. So rewind knob, wind on knob and shutter setting knob on the top, and then there's your shutter button at the top. It takes a standard cable release, and it's got two little red marks on the shutter button and on the knob itself. And if you turn that, if you set it into B mode, if you turn it with your finger like that, well, you'd have to hold that, turn it one way or the other. Let's see, that's it, like that. That means the shutter will remain open until you unlock it, but I prefer to use a cable release. It's got two eyelets, which is great, which the Zorki 4 doesn't have. You have to carry this in a case, but this one, it comes with these eyelets, which is great. The back of the camera is very plain and simple. You've just got the one rangefinder window. Now the rangefinder on this is not it's not as good as the Zorki one, which is very, very clear and it's highly magnified. This one seems a lot smaller, a little bit dimmer, but it's perfectly usable, and the rangefinder patch is great. It's not too small, and it's very, very easy to focus with this camera. Let's open the back. You open the back with these two knobs. Just twist them that way, one that way and one that way. On the back we've got the rewind button there, and we've got a standard tripod socket. Right, I'll show you how we're going to load film into this camera. It's pretty straightforward. It's different to the Leicas of the time. I think I'm right in saying, where the Leicas you had to actually cut the leader on the film and it slid into a slot over the shutter, which you couldn't see. I think I'm right in saying that. I could be wrong, but certain Leicas. But with this camera, it's dead easy to load. It's conventional. Place your leader in there. I'll just put the lens cap on. I don't want to waste these frames. And pull it across. I always find this awkward on videos. Pull it across like that until it goes into the take-up spool, if I can get it. Have a little look. That's it, it's engaged into the take-up spool there, and then just wind it on like that, and make sure that it engages with the sprockets at each side there and there. And when you've got it on like that, you simply put the back on. These two sides slip into these grooves at the back of the camera there. It forms a light tight seal, and then just slide it on like that, push it up, turn these catches to lock it, one there and then one there, and we're ready to go nearly. Wind the camera on twice. After you've done it once, what I would do is just tighten the film up. So we do that by just turning the rewind button. I can feel the film tightening up now. Just put that back on and wind on again, and you can see now that this wind up knob is turning as I advance the film, and that shows that the film is correctly loaded. Take the shot, wind on one more time, and then set the frame counter using that little knob there to number, if we can see this, I don't know if you can see this, to number, I'll have to just look down, to number 1. And if we take the shot, wind it on again, you'll see the frame counter move to number 2. You see that? So we're on number 2. So it's a great system. It's great how it works. To rewind the film, you press in this button here, which is the rewind button, but it won't stay and you have to keep it pressed down. So you press down on that and then turn the rewind knob. And what I normally do is, when I've used a roll up, I just listen for a click as the film's being rewound. And when I hear that click, I know that the film has come off, the leader has come off the take-up spool. Because really I don't want to wind the film all the way in, because it makes it awkward if you're doing your own developing. It's easier to leave the leader out. So if you just listen, that means hopefully the film has now come off the take-up spool, and the leader should be hanging out of the canister. And there we have it. So a great simple way of loading. And put the back on now. The back sometimes can be a little bit awkward to get on. It's always awkward in videos, and tighten it back up like that. So all in all, it's a really beautiful camera. It's very enjoyable to use. It's one of those cameras that inspires you to go out and take pictures because of its uniqueness. Because you really, you know, if you love the Contax name, although it says Kiev, it's like using a Contax rangefinder of that era. And as I say, you go out with this camera and you feel that you're holding a little bit of history in your hands, and it's a very enjoyable camera to use. And you know, when you consider the cost of some of the older Leicas, this camera I paid a couple of years back £60 for it. They've gone up a little bit, but you can still pick a good one up for around about £70 to £100 with the lens, and it's an absolute bargain really. For the price of that, you could, you know, for the price of what you pay for a Leica, you could buy 10 of these, and you're still going to get the same enjoyable experience using it. So if you like rangefinder cameras and you haven't tried one of these before, I'd certainly recommend using one. Just buy one and use it, and I'm sure you will enjoy the camera. So we'll move on now, and I'll show you some of the pictures I've taken with this particular camera. The first set of pictures were taken on a very horrible dull day around Otley where I live. I used Ilford FP4 and I developed that in 510 Pyro, a developer. I'll leave a link in the description to where you can buy this developer from. I'd really recommend you try it. It's a great developer. And the next pictures, these were taken using HP5 film, and again I developed those in 510 Pyro. As I say, I'm really getting to like that developer. So I'll show you the pictures, and at the end of the video, leave some comments and tell me what you think about them, and tell me what you think about this camera if you own one. What's your thoughts about it, and just ask any questions about this camera, and I'll get back to you and try and answer them as well as I can. So that's the end of another video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you liked the video, please give me a like. Better still, subscribe to my channel and hit that notification bell. If you have any questions, leave them below and I'll try my best to answer them. And as I always say, stay safe, and I'll see you all in the next video, and enjoy analog photography.